Good evening, and welcome to CityView Inside. I'm your host, Liz Hatch. CityView Inside is a program that will provide an opportunity for us to give you, the viewers, a kind of behind-the-scenes look at how the city operates. At different times, we'll hear directly from the departments that help keep the city moving, and we'll also try our best to keep you informed on happenings in and around Cambridge. Tonight, we're going to bring you an important show that will not only show us how the City of Cambridge stays committed to social justice, but continues to give voice to many of the unspoken societal issues that plague our nation. Tonight's guest, Elizabeth Speakman, is the coordinator of the newly formed Gender-Based Violence Initiative here in Cambridge. Elizabeth will give us an inside look at how the initiative will work and also help to pull back the curtain on a dangerous yet often unspoken practice that affects far too many. Let's watch a short clip and then we'll come back to speak with Elizabeth.
Domestic violence, also known as intimate partner violence, can happen to anyone, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, income, or other factors. While domestic violence has long been one of society's leading problems, the recent events surrounding the Ray Rice elevator video, and subsequently how the NFL chose to handle the situation, has thrust the issue into the national spotlight. While the statistics tell us that 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, the uptick in awareness will, hopefully, move this problem out of the shadows. The good news is that employers can play an important role in ending the cycle of violence. Almost all employers have employees who were or are victims of domestic violence. Increasingly, employers are developing company policies that address domestic violence and are encouraging those who have experienced abuse to reach out for assistance.
Nowhere in the corridors of pale green and gray, nowhere in the suburbs in the cold light of day, there in the midst of it, so alive and alone, words support like bone, dreaming of Mercy Street, where you're inside out, dreaming of mercy.
So Liz, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm really glad you came on to talk about this important issue.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
No problem. So your position officially started in the fall, but the conversation that was behind the creation of this position started much sooner than that.
Yes, Cambridge had the domestic violence free zone many years ago, and the city has always had a strong commitment to domestic violence intervention and prevention efforts. And then 3 or 4 years ago, former city councilor Marjorie Decker really decided to take on domestic violence and gender-based violence, and she spearheaded an effort to form this question campaign. So this large group of people came together in the city, city departments and agencies and residents, to go out in the community and ask, what are your questions about domestic violence?
Right.
And the group gathered over 1,000 questions from the community. Many of the questions were asking things like, how do I know if my relationship is abusive? What is domestic violence? A lot of disclosures, people saying things like, my husband takes my paycheck every week, is that abuse? So there was a lot that was gathered from that campaign and really highlighted the lack of knowledge and interest in knowing more about domestic violence.
Yeah. So how were these questions submitted?
They were submitted in many ways. People could text the questions. There was a website, so people could submit the questions through the website. There was a phone number that was set up so people could leave a voicemail. A lot of the questions were submitted in person, so this group really gathered a lot of people and
Yeah.
trained ambassadors to go out in the community.
Okay.
And so they went to malls, they went to some of the
Right.
squares, they went to community events and set up tables and invited people to come and have conversations about domestic violence and submit their questions.
Okay, interesting. So were any of the questions able to be submitted anonymously? Because this is an issue that some people are, very scared to talk about.
Absolutely. Yep. So all the questions that were, once someone submitted it, it was anonymous. So
Okay.
all of the questions that we have are not associated with a name or any identifying information. So it was really meant to sort of get some aggregate information about what are the questions that people have in this area.
Yeah.
So we weren't. So I wasn't involved in the group at the time. I just
Yeah.
started here in the fall, but the group is now sort of really thinking about how do we answer those questions in an aggregate way.
Okay.
So how to sort of do the public awareness campaigns that really kind of look at the questions people had, and then being
Right.
able to do some more public awareness events, really being able to address the questions that came up during the campaign.
Okay. So were a lot of the questions the same, or did you guys find that you were surprised by any?
So I
Once you got
so
into
when
the
I got
position
involved
and really-
and I was able to look through all the different questions, I was surprised at the amount of people who didn't know what domestic violence was. And I think in my time doing domestic violence work, I get used to sort of knowing all the different dynamics of abuse that can happen in relationships. But as I was looking through the questions, I was sort of remembering and realizing that a lot of people think of domestic violence as physical assaults.
Right.
And they picture black eye, the video that we just saw,
Yeah.
sort of the physical manifestations of abuse is
Yeah.
what people often imagine. And what I think came up through the question campaign is that there's so many other types of abuse that happen in relationships. Often physical abuse is the symptom or sort of the sign that
Yeah.
there's a lot of other things like that, tip of the iceberg, all of the other types of abuse and controlling behavior and isolation that happen. And so that was something that I think was sort of a reminder for me that there's still a huge need for education, that putting down your partner, humiliating, criticizing all the time, making them feel guilty about spending time with friends and family, jealousy, all of these other things can actually, for many people, feel more harmful than the physical assaults. And so there's a lot of need for education around all those other types of abuse that are sort of just as chipping away at someone's spirit and their identity.
Exactly. Well, that's good to know. So sort of along the same lines, education has come out of this, but what other changes did people sort of call for and want to see out of this initiative?
So there was a lot of question about prevention and how do we stop this from happening before it happens.
Right.
And so that was one of the reasons that the city worked alongside this group to figure out what the role the city can play in prevention efforts and sort of changing some of the social norms around this issue. And so that was what helped prompt the creation of my position.
Okay.
So my position is really, multi-layered, and one of the important facets of it is helping educate young people about relationships and gender roles, and how understanding of your role in relationship is really formative in younger years, and so how to help shape and shift that and work alongside our community partners to be able to sort of change some of those norms. As I think what came up in the question campaign is something the city is really committed to.
Okay. So do you think there'll be another follow-up campaign anytime soon?
There'll be many campaigns coming. So one of the things that I'm currently working on and working alongside this community group is a assets and needs assessment to sort of go a little bit deeper from the question campaign, and be able to have more of those one-on-one interviews with people and focus groups to be able to understand better, how can we share information? What information do you need? How can we share that information? Sort of concrete things like, is it social media? Is it flyers? Is it community forums? And also, what are the particular issues that are coming up in the communities that we can, maybe help with resources or supports for? So as we're sort of moving through this assessment process, I think the campaigns will sort of emerge of what that needs to be. So right now we're in the formative stages of figuring out what that's going to be.
Okay, cool. I look forward to hearing about it next time.
Yes, I'm sure I'll be back.
So one of the things you mentioned is, how you present the information. Have you guys found that people prefer it, electronically, or prefer the dialogue? You come in and talk and really find support with people, or do they really want to stay anonymous, and do they want to get their information online? And what have you guys seen in that realm so far?
So I think, in my experience, I think it has to be all of those in different ways. So I think there are pockets of people who really rely on, technology and social media and the internet to sort of get their information.
Absolutely.
And then there are people who really rely on community groups and sort of the face-to-face interactions. That's sort of where they get their information and where it sort of internalizes maybe more. And so I think there's going to be various types of awareness campaigns and information sharing depending on the populations, and being able to have that kind of multi-layered approach.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, thanks. So sort of once we get this conversation going, it's really important to think about how we react to, maybe somebody came and disclosed to me, and maybe I may have never experienced that, and maybe I could come to someone and say, hey, how should I react to this, or what should we be doing as an individual, and even as the community and as the city? How do we react?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. As we saw in the clip that was shown earlier, 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in our lifetime, and what that tells us is we all know someone, whether we know it or not. We do know someone who has been or is in an abusive relationship, and I think once people are more educated about some of the signs, they're more likely to sort of tune in to what may be actually going on in the relationship and ask different kinds of questions. And so if a friend or family member tells you, I'm dating this new person, and it's really much harder for me to get together with you. They really don't like when I go out at night. They really want to spend all their time with me. They want to sort of tell me what to wear, and some of these indicators that otherwise you might just think, oh, that doesn't sound great. But once you know more, you might think like, well, that sounds kind of controlling, and it could be heading down a path that it could be dangerous actually in the long run.
Absolutely.
But to be able to be really a support for that person and not to judge them or shame them or make them feel bad about their decisions, not to talk badly about their partner, because there are good parts of the relationship. So really to let them know that you're there for them no matter what they decide, because someone who's abusive in a relationship is trying to make the other person's life smaller, trying to isolate them. And so if it's hard as a friend or family member to sort of feel like you're sitting by and watching somebody in this really awful relationship. But if you cut them out and you say, I can't do this anymore, it's too hard for me to see you in this relationship, that's one less person they could go to if they do end up deciding they need some support or they need to leave. So really just being that constant presence for someone is huge.
Yeah. So in terms of the city, how have we moved forward in recognizing and addressing and talking and even responding? Because that's a new issue now. Everybody's talking about it. Now it's how do we act and what do we do? And so what have your roles been sort of in that realm?
So in my first few months, one of the things I've been doing is providing training for the police department. So they have an annual in-service training where all the whole police department goes through, and so I've been able to help coordinate a domestic violence training for the whole Cambridge Police Department, as well as Harvard and MIT. They come through the training as well. So we just wrapped that up, and it was a successful collaboration with Transition House, Emerge, and the Guidance Center, which are local programs that support people who experience trauma. So that was a great collaborative effort with the city and the service providers. And another effort has been to help the city create a policy to allow for time off for city employees who experience domestic violence and may need time off for going to court or counseling or that kind of thing.
So is this sort of a new law that we're trying to comply with, or are we, taking lead from other cities? Where is this new initiative coming from?
So there's a new law that was passed probably 8 or 9 months ago now. That's a comprehensive domestic violence package that includes many criminal justice aspects. It really kind of stemmed from the Remy case and some of the gaps in the criminal justice system that led to that homicide. And so there's several other components in addition to criminal justice, but so one of them is this Employee Leave Act. And so it requires that employers with 50 or more employees provide up to 15 days off for domestic violence survivors who need time for domestic violence related issues. So if they need to go to court, if get a restraining order, if there's ongoing custody issues that are related to domestic violence, if they need counseling. So employers with 50 or more employees need to be able to allow that time for our employees. So the city is taking the lead from that, and really we're working together on figuring out what that policy exactly is going to look like, and then rolling it out to employees along with education and information about resources that are also available to them.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Do you expect it to be finished anytime soon, or?
That's the hope. Yeah. I know things can take a little while sometimes, but we're very, very close to being done, and hoping in the next month or so to be able to really roll that out to employees and get the information out there about not only the policy but services and resources that are available for people as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's very important. Well, that's pretty interesting. I had no idea about that.
Well, now you know as a city employee.
That's so awesome. So how about any other initiatives that you guys are working on?
So primarily we're really focusing on this needs assessment process.
Right.
We have currently met with the community engagement team has outreach workers, and we've met with them to understand better the community needs around domestic violence, and they've given us some really great suggestions around how to information share with the various communities that exist in Cambridge. We've also started meeting with some of the local nonprofits and domestic violence agencies. We're going to be meeting with the Housing Authority next week and the school department soon. And so we're really trying to find out, what are the resources that are available for survivors of domestic violence, and where are some of the gaps? What are the needs that still exist? So we also really want to be doing more awareness raising, and this is one of the efforts at being able to do that, helping people know that the city cares very much about this issue, and we're committed to hearing from citizens and employees what we can do to better provide services and support for people.
So what would you suggest if somebody wants to make, a comment or has a question? Would you suggest they contact you directly, or
Absolutely.
do you guys have services?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be glad to hear from people directly. In my new role here, getting to know the city, I'm trying to reach out as much as I can and make connections in the community, and also with the universities. So anybody who has an interest in this issue and wants to contact me and share their thoughts, I'd be thrilled to hear from people about that. That would be great.
Awesome. So you mentioned some of the, the city is working and with all these other people, but what are some of the resources that the city itself is offering?
The city has many resources that I'm still learning about. So we know the Human Service Department provides a huge range of supportive services for families.
Right.
And the Cambridge Police Department has a domestic violence unit as well as a sexual assault unit. And we've been working really closely with them around these initiatives as well. The Cambridge Police Department also created a new position that's a social work position. And so I've been working closely with Kathy Pemberton is in that role, and she is focused on domestic violence as well as youth work. So she's definitely a resource the city can call on. The Cambridge Police Department also has a domestic violence liaison position that is open currently and hoping to be posted soon, working with them around that. And so that's another huge resource that the city is supporting around this issue. The Cambridge Public Health Department has a position as well, the Violence and Injury Prevention Coordinator. And so the woman in that position, Nancy, and I are working very closely together on these initiatives as well. And then the Women's Commission has historically taken on a lead role with domestic violence awareness and support, and so we're working very closely with them as well. So it's been a really nice collaborative within the city, as well as the community providers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think in the future some of the things you would like to see come of your position?
There's so many things I'd like to see. So one thing that feels really important is to have more connections within community groups. So connecting more with tenant councils, with some of the neighborhood associations, to be able to better understand what the needs of the particular communities are, and be able to sort of tailor approaches for those communities. And I think working with youth is really critical. It feels like it's important to me that we find the ways to be able to educate youth and better understand what they're going through, and better understand the strengths that they have, and the assets that are within the youth community, to be able to shore them up as well as peer leaders, and educate their peers. So that feels like an important component to me as well. And there are many, this is a diverse community, and so I think the approach that I take will be really dependent on who we hear from and what they're interested in partnering with us on. And so working, both from the systems perspective around the policy and, changing the way that protocols happen, and also on this, sort of deeper level within community feels really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really interesting. You did mention earlier that you were meeting with, different departments, and one of them being the school department. And you just mentioned how, you think it's so important to educate the youth. Do you foresee maybe a youth group forming from this, or?
So that would be fantastic. So Transition House is the local domestic violence agency, and they have had a group called the Youth Action Council that has been a peer leader group. So I'm working with them to figure out what that model can be. Do we collaborate with them, and or do we have a different focus? So we're still in conversations. I think whatever we do will be in collaboration with Transition House. And so I think having some kind of peer leader model is really ideal in many ways, and thinking about the mayor's summer program, and how can we partner with them around this huge group of youth that they work with, and being able to maybe have a broad-based approach where we try to infuse some education information with that whole group, and then also maybe have a group from there that gets sort of a little bit deeper education information and becomes the leaders within their peer groups. There's a lot of great models for youth engagement in that way. So we're sort of exploring right now what that might look like, and we'll certainly come back here and be able to, sort of showcase what the youth are doing in hopefully 6 months or so. But it's sort of still in progress right now.
Yeah. Well, that would be wonderful. I'd love to hear about it. So one of the things that you had mentioned to me earlier is about the current events that you're doing, and one of the things is the steering committee. So can you explain to me a little bit what that is right now?
Sure.
And where it's headed?
So the Domestic Violence Steering Committee is the group that Marjorie Decker had helped put together a few years ago, and has been meeting. They really were the ones who did this question campaign, and so they've been meeting since then, and helped encourage the city to create my position. So when I came on, we, sort of started thinking about, now that I'm here, what can this initiative look like? They have more capacity to be able to advance some of the goals that they've had. So it's really a very a collaborative effort. Transition House is a key member of the steering committee, as well as other local agencies. The city departments are all represented. Many of them are represented. We're working on recruitment now.
Yeah.
And we also have many Cambridge residents who have an interest in this issue, and thankfully have some time to devote to it. So we currently meet once a month. And we're, sort of looking at this needs assessment process as our big project right now, sort of going out together in pairs to be able to do interviews and focus groups. And so it's a really a nice collaborative effort that has. We also have representatives from Harvard and MIT. So we're really sort of looking to have a broad-based approach. And once we do the needs assessment, we'll be creating subcommittees that will have different topic focuses. And so we're planning for DV month now, sort of figuring out what that's going to look like, which is in October. And so we're sort of thinking about what we want to have done in October. We're hoping that our needs assessment will be completed and we'll have a report to be able to present at that time. And so the steering committee is going to end up having subcommittees that are have people working on it who are outside of the steering committee. So we're hoping to sort of involve even more people as we move forward. The initiative also has an executive committee that is Rich Rossi, the city manager, Lisa Peterson, the deputy city manager, Bob Haas, the commissioner of the police department, Claude Jacob, the head of the public health department, Ellen Seminoff from Human Services, Kimberly Sansucci for the Women's Commission, Greg Ross from Housing, and Jim Maloney from the school department. So we have this really great invested group of people on the executive committee who are really committed to making sure that sort of what sort of comes up in the needs assessment from the steering committee, they're able to help us implement in a holistic way. So we have a lot of commitment from the city and from the community.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for this edition of CityView Inside. Thank you so much for joining me, Liz. Liz is the Gender-Based Violence Coordinator, and I would like to thank her for coming on CityView Inside today. And she not only helped us understand a bit more about the initiative, but she helped us think about how each of us can get involved. For more information about this topic, please check out the city's website at www.cambridgema.gov. For broadcast schedule information, you can check the 22 CityView website at www.cambridgema.gov/22CityView. For the staff at 22 CityView, I'm Liz Hatch. Good night, and thanks for watching.